In the heart of the snowy Canadian wilderness, where the trees stood tall and the nights were steeped in silence, a cozy cabin awaited its occupant. Emily, the woman seeking solace from roaring city life, had rented the isolated retreat for a weekend of peace and healing. The first evening was blissful, a rare opportunity to read her favorite books, wrapped in a warm blanket beside the crackling fire. Her phone buzzed, shattering the tranquility. It was Sarah, her best friend, calling to express her concern about the storm brewing outside and the cabin's remote location. "It's fine, Sarah. I'll be just fine here. I have everything I need," Emily reassured her, brushing off the unease that lured in the corners of her mind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting an orange hue across the sky, a creeping dread seeped into the atmosphere. Soft, crackling noises echoed outside, sound of branches snapping in the darkened woods. She dismissed it as wildlife, losing herself again in the pages of her book. That sense of safety wouldn't last, however. Just as she poured herself a cup of steaming tea, a knock echoed through her cabin, jolting her upright, and standing at the small porch was a delivery guy. Tom, he was polite, serving up a smile too wide for comfort. "Brought you some groceries, Mon," he called out, his voice eerily cheerful. The shadows from the forest danced behind him as the wind whispered through the trees. Something about his demeanor didn't sit right with Emily, but she couldn't pinpoint why. After a brief conversation, she thanked him and closed the door, but unease settled in her bones. That night, Emily couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Shadows flitted past her windows, and whispers floated through the stillness. She switched on the exterior lights, illuminating nothing but the snow-draped ground, the trees standing sentry like silent sentinels. Perhaps it was the isolation playing tricks on her mind. As dawn broke the next day, a sense of dread loomed heavier than the snowfall. Emily prepared to head outside, only to discover a window slightly ajar. She distinctly remembered locking. Cold dread washed over her, and as she moved through the cabin, her eyes landed on a child's toy. It lay innocently on the floor, brightly colored, yet unrecognizable to her. Panic unfurled in her chest. "I have to get out of here," Emily muttered, reaching for her phone to call Sarah. But as she pressed the power button, nothing happened. The phone was dead. With each passing minute, the cabin felt smaller, the walls closing in around her. Deciding to brave the outside world, she drove into the nearest town a few miles away. As she parked by an old grocery store, a sense of helplessness consumed her. It was there that she spotted Jake, her ex-boyfriend, leaning against the building. A sickening familiarity twisted in her gut. "Emily, fancy seeing you here," she shouted, making his way over to her. Jake was charming and loved emphatically, but his temper had driven Emily to escape the secure facade he carried. "What are you doing here?" An edge, check of trepidation in her voice. Jake claimed he was just passing through, but there was an unsettling intensity as he leaned closer. "Let me walk you back to your cabin. It's dangerous out here alone." Emily felt cornered again, the shadows of her past rising to engulf her. Agreeing reluctantly, she trudged back to the car, her heart pounding. Back at the cabin, Emily sat staring at the door. No sign of any danger had followed her. The afternoon slipped into evening, and a disheartening feeling of calm washed over her as the sun faded. Then she found it unsettling. Messages scribbled on paper and left at her doorstep, chillingly revealing that someone had been watching her every move. In that moment, it clicked to toy the window. Jake, the threads of obsession weaving into her life again. Emily spent the rest of the evening preparing, barricading her doors, and gathering her belongings to escape at first light. Just as she moved to lock a back window, she heard it, footsteps. A lump formed in her throat as the sound drew closer, hesitant and slowly circling her cabin. Plunged into darkness. As the power went out, Emily's heart raced. She pressed her ear against the door, listening, straining to catch every noise. Panic flared as she realized she wasn't alone. They were outside, Jake, and an unfamiliar voice. "Emily, I know you're in there. Jake's voice broke through the silence, tainted by an unsettling edge. With nowhere to go, Emily glanced around, searching for a means of escape. She recalled a back door that led to the dense woods. Lurking close, she sensed the stalkers waiting for her next move. With courage igniting within her, Emily steeled herself. She took a deep breath, ready to fight her way free. Barriers between safety and danger blurred a fight for her very life against the shadows of her past. The wood creaked beneath her feet as she distanced herself from the cabin, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. Through the forest, she felt blind terror and sheer determination intermingle, each step further dragging her back to a haunting reality. Emily swiftly maneuvered through the dark, her heart thundering as she passed the lurking men. Mustering the strength within, she triumphed over fear, carefully avoiding a tree snagged in shadow. She spotted something out of place, small flashlight peeking from the ground. She snatched it up just as the howling wind cried out, urging her onward. The voices of her stalkers faded, and with every step pulling her closer to freedom, she burst into the night. Freedom tasted sweet yet sour, her limbs heavy with exhaustion, and a sip of dread tinged her mind. She could still feel eyes on her. She stumbled upon a hiking trail, well-trodden, yet stretching endlessly into dark mystery. As she ran, the darkness wrapped around her. Nature's embrace a stark comparison to the predatory intentions she had just escaped. Emerging from the woods, Emily felt the chill settle deeper, the anxiety lifting to caution as she reached the nearest road. Psst. A car approached, and she raised her hand to signal, desperate for salvation. When she finally reached home, Emily stood in her small, cozy apartment, shaking with the remnants of terror while reflecting on her experience. She had faced her demons, fought them, and survived. Yet wrapped in those fleeting moments of safety, she held her breath, listening intently, her eyes darting towards the window. The wind howled eerily. Then she heard it, a faint whisper that echoed around her, sending chills racing down her spine. From the shadows beyond the window, a figure loomed, and Emily's heart sank. The unease she thought she had escaped was lurking, waiting patiently to pounce once more. Isolation wrapped its cold arms around her, whispering that true safety was an illusion, and the shadows they would always come back for more, waiting, watching, wanting. Emily shuddered and prayed that this time she could outrun the darkness. Deep down, she realized the real horror was just beginning.